The president of Poland is also softening on support for Ukraine. So this is from The Hill. Poland's president, Andrzej Duda, Ukraine like drowning person clinging to anything available. Duda's comments, which I'm going to play for you in a moment, come just days after Poland led a group of neighboring countries in banning Ukrainian grain imports. Poland has been a steadfast supporter of Ukraine since the war began and has taken in more than 1 million Ukrainian refugees. Public sentiment around the issue, however, has started to deteriorate, putting the ruling party in a difficult position ahead of a close October election. See, elections in most civilized countries don't last 3 years. They last a couple of months. So this is campaign season in Poland, and because public support has begun to slip, so has the president's rhetoric. The far-right Confederation Party, again, the right wing being the source of most anti-war sentiment, not just here, but in Poland too, apparently, is hoping to capitalize on the waning support in the country. Reuters reported that a recent poll showed support for Ukrainian refugees fell from 91% when the war started to just 69% recently. The same survey showed a quarter of Poles are against supporting refugees compared to 4% in early 2022. So let's hear the president's comments firsthand.
My jesteśmy tym, który ratuje. Jak jest tonący, każdy, kto kiedykolwiek brał udział w ratowaniu tonącego, czy każdy, kto kiedykolwiek uczył się o tym, co dzieje się w tej sytuacji, wie o tym, że człowiek tonący jest niesłychanie niebezpieczny, ponieważ może pociągnąć w głębiny. Ma siłę niewyobrażalną na skutek obawy osobistej, wpływu adrenaliny i może po prostu utopić ratującego. Chwyta się wszystkiego, mówi się przecież w przysłowiu, tonący brzytwy się chwyta. Rzeczywiście tonący chwyta się wszystkiego, czego się da. Trochę to jest taka sytuacja, jak dzisiaj między Polską a Ukrainą. Czy trzeba działać tak, żeby się obronić przed uczynieniem nam szkody przez tonącego? Oczywiście, że musimy tak działać, żeby się obronić przed uczynieniem nam szkody przez tonącego, bo jak tonący doprowadzi do szkody i nas utopi, to nie dostanie pomocy. W związku z powyższym to my musimy pilnować tutaj swoich interesów. To jest przede wszystkim nasz obowiązek i będziemy to robili skutecznie i zdecydowanie.
Okay, now back to the Hill article here. At the same time, however, Duda has maintained his commitment to helping Ukraine. In an interview with CNN's Jake Tapper on Tuesday, Duda reaffirmed his support for defeating Russia completely. Quote, Russia can be stopped only if it is defeated, and it will be defeated when Ukraine pushes out the Russian army from the occupied territories, thanks to the help of the United States, thanks to the help of the West, and when it regains control over its internationally recognized borders, Duda said in the interview. Only then will we be able to say that Russian imperialism was really defeated. So he did walk back what sounded like and what was interpreted by a lot of media outlets as cutting off support for Ukraine. They later said, well, that's not exactly what we meant. They're not going to be getting any of the new weapons that we take in, but we will still support them in some way, shape, or form. So this is not a situation where they're cutting them off cold turkey, but it is another situation where just ahead of an election, they're obviously seeing polling slip massively. I mean, a 22% slip in support for refugees in a year, not just to the undecided camp, but to the anti-refugee side. Anti-refugee sentiment was only 4% a year ago. Now it's up to 25%. That's quite drastic.
Yeah, no, I mean, the situation is complex. A lot of it is probably political in the sense that there is an election coming up. There is opposition to Duda that does not support more aid, more militarization, and also more refugees. And a big issue here is also this grain deal. So Ukraine is cut off at the Black Sea right now because there's fighting between Russia and Ukraine there. And so Ukraine isn't able to get its grain out through the Black Sea, and so has been relying on the EU and others to find alternatives, the EU and the United States to find alternatives, which is why you're always hearing pushing, we need a grain deal, we need a grain deal.
Well, that's
we need
interesting.
Russia.
That could also explain why they tried to walk back what sounded like a more anti-Ukraine statement, right?
Right.
I mean, they can't afford to make enemies of the EU.
Right. So Russia's not going to support Ukraine's grain being shipped through the Black Sea because Russia is not getting any of its own demands or security interests met. So what's happened is that Poland, Hungary, these countries, they've been told you've got to import more grain from Ukraine because Ukraine is, essentially an economic basket case. It was already one of the poorest countries in the region. Now it's just a complete and utter disaster. And so that has actually put a strain on these economies. These governments are like, well, if we import too much of this grain, it is going to destabilize our own markets, our own situation, and those countries aren't doing too well themselves. And so with inflation and all of this, and so they're like, no, we're not going to do it. And this, I think, is just another additional issue that the collective West is having around Ukraine. And no one wants this. I mean, it's junk, right? There's plenty of grain to go around. Russia produces a whole lot of grain. Ukraine is, not as necessary as the United States and NATO makes it out to be. And so when you make Ukraine a pariah state, these are the things that could happen. Even your best friends could turn on you. But also Poland is kind of a complex country too, because Russia has been saying for a long time throughout this conflict that Poland maybe wants to take some of Ukraine at some point. Maybe it wants, before the Soviet Union was and Ukraine, before Ukraine was absorbed into the Soviet Union, a lot of Ukraine's western territory was actually demarcated by Poland. So there are rumors that maybe Poland wants some of that territory back as part of this opportunism that has run amok out of this conflict. It's unclear whether that's even possible or feasible, whether that's going to happen. But there are a lot of suspicions that that's what Poland, especially its elites and oligarchs, that they want. They want to take back what they felt was theirs, which was taken from them during the Soviet era. So it's unclear, but I think the problem is, and the big point here is that when these words come out of the mouths of someone like Duda, they actually, regardless of how they act and whether they walk it back, they mean something, because what he's saying is Ukraine is a drowning person. I think it's worse than that. I think it's drowned already. I think Ukraine is worse than a drowning person, and even more dangerous, because now we don't know what could happen from here when Ukraine being dead, how, without any possibility for resuscitation, what will the United States and NATO do? How can they truly keep this conflict going? But at the same time, it means a lot for someone like this to say this. It means that there is, even amongst those who are supposed to be the most affable to Ukraine, they're not happy with the situation. They're not happy with taking it on the chin all the time just to ensure that this proxy war continues. And so I think we're going to see more of this, even from people like Duda, who are not. They're not good actors. They have their own interests, and they truly are committed to what NATO and the United States are doing. They just want it to be done in a way where it doesn't destroy them too. And I don't think that's unreasonable, but at the same time, I think it is pretty laughable when even in this moment where Zelensky's in Washington at the UN, he can't even get Poland to speak nicely throughout. Right. The way he can't even get,
sure.
Like, this is a country that has been trying its best to hide its own interests while looking like a true steward for Ukraine's cause, and it's just not going too well right now.
Well, that's an interesting aspect of it that, I hadn't thought about, because we don't think about it much. I mean, here in the U.S., even on whatever anti-war left there is to hang on to, we think of, this conflict as sort of a global chess match where Ukraine is this sort of pivotal piece, and it's the theater for, more sort of global war, a global conflict. But, as you think about the neighboring states, you have to also remember Ukraine is the largest country in Europe, and it is a resource-rich country. And so a country like Poland makes sense that it would have interests that are narrower than ours. But at the same time, they are integrated into this network so that they have to toe a certain line also. So, yeah, that's an interesting angle.
I think it's just the disaster that was the end of the Soviet Union. I mean, it's created this situation where NATO does its very best to mobilize these states, absorb them even into its infrastructure so that it can use them how it sees fit. I think now we're seeing how, regardless of how effective that can be at any given moment, when you overstep your bounds, when you take a step into a dark side that you truly cannot navigate or manage, then things can unravel pretty quickly. And so I think public relations and even just rhetoric these days can be underestimated sometimes, because of course what matters most is policy. But when various forces, whether it's Washington, people like Kevin McCarthy, or whether people like Duda start talking differently, then it means that something is going on. The reality of the situation is perhaps looking bleaker. Perhaps there are problems, there are divisions that are really important to, I think, to highlight, because they do show how this like all knowing, like all dominant kind of force that the United States projects with NATO is surely not as stable as it may appear on the surface.
Please clap.